So hello and welcome to a very special episode of A Sort of Young Person's Guide to Prog Rock. We are reaching our grubby little hands into the big old bag of postage that you guys have been sending us. And we're going to whip out some of these finest of letters and read your mail. So, I am joined by the two people who know most about the post office more than anyone else on earth. I am joined by Sergeant Brian Gann. Let's rewind. I was like, I don't know if they have ranking.
No, just go with it. It's good.
All right, there we go. I'm joined by Sergeant Brian Gann.
Reporting for duty.
And of course, Private First Class Ryan Robison.
I got demoted again?
Oh yeah, no, you're gonna be on.
I gotta clean up my act.
Are you the Postmaster General? Like, this is a...
Well, no, I started as Postmaster General. I'm down to Private First Class. You can't imagine how much trouble I've gotten in.
Yeah, you can't imagine what he does with your post. So here we go. So we're here, and nice and easy. We're just going to be reading your mail and thinking thoughts here. Before we start, as always, thank you guys so much for your post, and feel free to send it to helloprogfrog@gmail.com, at progfrogpod on Instagram. Send it. We'll get to another mailbag episode at some point. As always, rate us wherever you're listening. If you have any prog-enthused friends, let them know about the show. And as always, thank you for listening. But for now, let us dive right in with the first question. Hey, sort of young people, I've noticed that you've stuck to the biggest bands in prog rock, brackets, Pink Floyd and Yes. Though I understand why, I'd love to hear more about Rush, Gentle Giant, Camel, he says VDG but Van der Graaf Generator. Do you have any other bands that you think are worthy of your attention? Thanks for the show, and it's nice to hear sort of young people who love this type of music. Soren. Thank you, Soren, for that. So I'm going to rephrase that question for you guys. What do you think the 7th best prog band is? After Pink Floyd, Genesis, King Crimson, Yes, Jethro Tull, and ELP.
Ooh. Now, Ian...
Good. Brian, go.
Now, Ian...
He's pulling rank.
Now, Ian, the 6 prog rock bands you just mentioned, is that your invention? Or is there some sort of consensus in the music community?
No. This is actually a scientific formula. KC plus PF. No, no, okay. Actually, I'll throw this out to you guys. So I genuinely think that the 6 here, I think, fill a very specific niche in my heart, but I think prog rock fandom. And briefly, it's like Pink Floyd's Pink Floyd. Just the masters of the concept album, obviously commercial success through the whatever. Genesis they're kind of the showman of prog rock. Obviously, they had their theater kid beginnings and then went on to have lots of commercial success. King Crimson is the jazz nerds, small local club, all that sort of stuff. Yes is the space fairies, and you need to have that in your life. Jethro Tull is kind of the folkier, earthier, bluesier of all of this, and then ELP is the stadium band. For me, the next one that came after all of these 7 is Rush. I'd say they're the other one that just off the top of my head is like whatever, and yes, we will be getting to them in the 3rd season of this prog podcast. Yeah, so Rush is the most obvious one in terms of I think they took a lot of the best elements that all of these 6 bands that came before and, kept the adventurous spirit, kept the, kind of amazing musicianship, and added kind of philosophical lyrics of, of their own Rushy universe. And obviously have a kind of a stadium show that people love to go watch, so they'd be my 7th. So I guess the other thing I'd throw, maybe if we're talking like the OG 1970s prog, Gentle Giant is just not quite at that level for reasons we'll talk about in a future episode. They just don't have the same commercial / I guess broad fan love, but they have a cult community, and we'll be getting into what makes them so gosh darn good. And I guess what I was thinking about at the beginning there, by laying out where all of these bands fit into the constellation for me, is I don't think you can double it up, but not as well. So there's other prog bands that I've experienced on my journey in the first blossoming of my love of prog, and the kiss of death for me is always like, they are like Jethro Tull, just worse, or they are like ELP, but worse. You know, like, I think it's like you've got space in your heart for one Space Fairy band, one jazz nerd band, one theater kid band. You can't do that, but not as well. And so I think you have to think about all of this as a constellation, and, you know, only one band can be in the star, like the space in the sky at any given time. So anyways, that's my very long, long way of saying it's either Rush or Gentle Giant.
I think it has to go to Rush. I think they've just had such an outsized impact, and I
Yeah.
think they have the bona fide 70s classic. I mean, I think there's a lot of later fringe bands on the edge of being prog rock or the fringe of prog rock. I think
Yeah.
Rush has all of the qualifications and more, and the big impact. I will give maybe a shout out to Wishbone Ash.
Yeah.
I do really listen to Argus from time to
Okay.
time. They don't have anywhere near, I feel, as big of an impact. And I had to do a little research before I said this because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, they only have 3 or 4 albums. They actually have like 23, but in my incredibly scientific way of measuring impact, about half of their albums don't have Wikipedia pages. So that's
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
I'm measuring their relevance.
That's legitimate. I think that actually is genuinely probably a fair metric. And I was gonna say, I think all of the krautrockers, they are classic, but they're almost in another lane. And then the same thing with the Canterbury bands. So we talked about Caravan on this podcast, who I love dearly in their own little way, but them and Camel are probably the two biggest of those, are almost off in their own other little world. Definitely with Brian Eno. They're all like adjacent to prog and whatever. But I guess I'm just thinking, like, you know, what's a band with 5 albums each on the, you know, Rolling Stones top 100 of prog or whatever, and genuinely all 6 of these first bands plus Rush will have 5 albums easily on these kind of top 100 of all prog time lists. So yeah, there you go. That would be my answer. Any other thoughts?
I tried to go in a different direction because this was Ian gave us some spoilers of what the questions were, and this was the one I prepared for the longest. I found myself just scanning my library trying to find an answer outside of those 7, because I think Rush makes it 7.
Yep.
And I couldn't do it. I even tried to go modern. And I guess I'll define modern as anything from the 1990s to now. But, I went for, okay, let's think about Radiohead. Let's think about the Mars Volta. Let's think about Dream Theater, Spock's Beard, and that. And I am going to get excoriated for this. None of that will stand the test of time because they all end up, and maybe I'm kind of piggybacking on your point, but they all end up like an ersatz version of something that came before it.
No, and I was going to say, this is no knock on anyone. It's really hard
it's not.
to be the original. But I was like, I think, to take it all the way there, I've never heard another album that's like Dark Side of the Moon. And I think, when you start comparing other classic albums like your Abbey Roads or your Led Zeppelin 4s or whatever, or even sidestepping to a Close to the Edge, it's just apples and oranges. And it's not good, bad, or otherwise. It's just like, I've never heard an album like it again. And ditto for, I've never heard a career like them. And even though, obviously, the rest didn't have the same commercial impact, I think I've never heard a career like Jethro Tull or a career like ELP. Like, they did what they did, and they were the ones. Email number 2. Sorta Young People. I hear you down on John Anderson's lyrics all the time. I love them. They're so full of meaning. If you can take the time to hear them, winky face. Roundabout, Close to the Edge, Life's Journey. Starship Trooper, Guardian Angels, Heart of the Sunrise, Meeting the Creator / the Furnace of Creation. But that's just what I hear. Love from Arizona, Gene. Would love to hear what you hear.
When have we ever been down on them?
Ooh, well, I'm going to actually expand that out, and I'll say thank you so much, Gene. I would not say we've been down on them. I say we've laughed heartily because they are inherently ridiculous. But actually, I'm going to expand this question out to something even bigger. We love Yes's lyrics, and we're going to get into that in a second. But what are some of the best lyrics prog has to offer? I'm going to start with, I guess, probably the most basic set of lyrics, just because I love them, and they're just self-explanatorily easy to love. So ever since you and I did the Progmas, Ryan, I have been singing Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Pirates to myself regularly. And I'd say this is a Peter Sinfeld lyric, and it's perhaps one of the most straightforward and well done. Like, it's just great imagery plus musical story. And, like, you can sing it, and it's got a storybook element to it. And actually, Peter Sinfeld, who did the lyrics for the first 4 King Crimson albums, just fantastic with the imagery. And I think here of the songs In the Court of the Crimson King and In the Wake of Poseidon. In the Court is just a bunch of cool lines, like you're in the Court of the Crimson King, hey, it's a fire witch, hey, it's whatever. Like, they're just great imagery. And then I think the In the Wake, to me, conjures like the gods looking down on the folly of humankind. And to rewind to that album, the expanded album cover has 12 faces, which represent human archetypes or something like that. And the song is in 12 couplets. So apparently each couplet represents a face on the album cover. I kind of saw how that was true, but it doesn't really matter. I think, again, just he's conjuring up really cool imagery. So I'm going to say shout out to Peter Sinfeld. Love it. Do you have any others?
I think maybe a cop-out, but Pink Floyd, I still think they're the reigning kings of accessibility. Yep. They're just easy to pick up on what the themes are, and maybe that's a low bar, but I just think they're very clear in their concepts, and maybe too clear. Money is about money, surprisingly. It doesn't take a genius to figure out who the pigs are on animals. Yeah. So maybe I'm going to approach it from a low bar perspective, but I'll go Pink Floyd.
I mean, absolutely. I was going to say, I think they are great universal themes. Money, greed, war, hate, all of that will be evergreen concepts. And there'll be evergreen concepts above and beyond kind of love songs, which will always be, famous songs, always be good songs. I think it's just if you want to use the word deep, I think Pink Floyd will have that on lock for a long time to come. And they're good without being too, like, overweighted. So, yeah, I think they did a good job.
No argument there. I mean, with you, Brian, The Wall, not a confusing metaphor, not hard to get your arms around that. You know what? I'm going to go with yes. And
okay.
I'll go with Close to the Edge and You and I, because it's like abstract art where you can find any meaning in it that you want.
Yep.
But not in the crappy modern art sense where
okay, yeah.
Somebody could have slapped this together in 5 minutes. Like, what is this? What are they saying? But, John paints these unbelievable pictures that don't make any sense to me, but it's almost like it's like a Rorschach test, or it's like a Jackson Pollock painting. You're going to see what you want to see. And it's really, it works for anybody, I think.
So, and it's funny you mentioned that. So I've got 3 theories as to why John Anderson's lyrics are just fantastic. So the first one is that I think the evocativeness for me comes from the abstractness, because they mean something different to everyone.
Yeah.
And then it also means I revisit them. So I'm listening to the song 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and I was like, oh, I didn't even pick up on that the first time. Or it means something different to me now this time, or something like that. I think the fact that he uses just crazy words mean that the songs have a sticking point.
Yeah, like the word play itself.
Even Siberia goes through the motion.
Yeah.
And you're like, when am I going to hear these words again? It's funny. So every time I'm, out and about in my life and I hear someone say seasoned or Siberia or whatever, I'm like, yeah, okay. That reminds me of a Yes song. And I think it's just such crazy lyrics that, that they seem to link up with a bunch of random stuff. And I don't know, genuinely, it's like forming neural connections with 8,000 things. So I think they're kind of sticky and hooky in that regard. And then finally, they're always positive. I think I could imagine someone not being in the place to listen to The Wall.
Sure.
Certainly maybe not listen to Animals or something like that. I think, if you've got 20 minutes to spare, you're always in the place for yes.
There's always room for yes.
There's always room for yes. So one other strain of prog rock that is actually on the other end, I'm going to throw out both Thick as a Brick specifically, Jethro Tull more generally, and then kind of Peter Gabriel era Genesis as just so English. It can be really good. Obviously, we can get some longer slogs or some sniggering into your like uniform tee hee hee I'm so clever type of stuff. But actually, when it's good, I actually feel like they both tap into almost like a folkloric storytelling aspect that I think both Peter Gabriel and Ian Anderson really just nail. So that would be another thing I'd throw in. That's a great strain of prog lyricism.
Yeah, Thick as a Brick is a favorite of mine, though, just because, I mean, right, it's Ian Anderson making fun of a whole genre, at the same time taking it seriously and writing an epic poem that, again, the whole thing is a joke, but, it speaks to...
But it gets it.
Yeah, it gets its own joke.
It reminds me of someone saying the best adaptation of King Arthur was Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Because you have to get all of the jokes to get the joke. And I think like Thick as a Brick really vividly captures a 45-minute prog song about kind of pretentious topics whilst being an easy listen. And again, I think that's down to I don't know how else to put it, and I don't even know what I mean by it, but like super English wordplay.
Well, it's super English wordplay, and it's kind of a coming of age story, a young man trying to find his place in the world. So the concepts aren't anything like new, but it's so cheeky. That's the word.
Yeah, cheeky. There you go. Yeah. I think it's humorous without being like a joke song.
And yet it is.
We'll get to that in a second, though.
Did we answer Gene's question at all?
We said we loved yes.
I know, but that we're summarizing it like...
I don't know. We will at some point get to more yes in a second, I think.
All right.
We'll see. Next question. Hey, gang, just started listening, but liking so far. In the first 4 episodes, you mention all sorts of stuff about stereo and studio techniques. Brackets also loved Ed's guitar talk. Do you have a clear list of what makes, quote-unquote, psychedelic music? I've always associated it with sounding like colors, but I'm not even sure I know what that means. Thanks, guys. Keep it up. Anonymous, I guess. So thank you so much, Anonymous.
I mean, I'm going to go with the tried and true. I can't tell you what psychedelia is, but I know it when I hear it.
Okay. Yeah.
Anonymous's description as it sounds like colors, I don't know why that rings true for me, but I also can't explain it. And I guess this is tricky because I would say psychedelic is certainly a different genre than prog rock. Related, there's overlap, but I think I wouldn't, call any of the bands, like let's go back to the Sinister Six that we were just talking about. I wouldn't call any of them solidly psychedelic bands. Mind you, I think, like early Pink Floyd certainly had their psychedelic phases, but their classic sounds, I would say, does sound distinctly different.
It's like they all grow up out of it. They have to get it out of their system before they assume their final form.
So this is actually a really deep point that you make. And here's now me explaining the joke so I can ruin it for everyone. But no, so here's when I deconstruct what psychedelia means. Legitimately, it came out of the technical advancements of the studio circa like in 1966 to like 68 or whatever. So my kind of 2 main beats about what psychedelic music is when you're actually hearing it is that it's playing with space and time and playing with naturalness. So obviously, circa 1965, 4 people would go into a studio, they'd set up on a microphone. If they were lucky, maybe do 3 overdubs or something like that. But they set up on a microphone, and the drums would be the drums, and the singing would be the singing. Then the Beatles started getting crazy, and you can listen to Ed's guitar episode. Thank you, Ed. The overdrive and wah-wah and distortion or whatever, obviously they put that on the guitars, but they also put that on the vocals. So like you start to get the John Lennon, like, can you take me down? And it's all like woozy and whatever. And it's...
That was so close.
To my John Lennon approximation. But I mean, I think it is legitimately true. Like, I think you're starting to play with backwards guitar effects with phasing, all this sort of stuff. And it cannot be done by human beings anymore. It then doesn't sound natural, so you're making crazy effects that are, beyond reality, I guess, beyond naturalness, beyond space and time. And so I think all the speeding up and slowing down. So that's my kind of point about psychedelicness is it's literally just effects. We talked a lot about it at the time, but they hadn't figured out stereo, so they'd put the drums in one ear and the singing in the other ear, that type of stuff. But it doesn't sound normal. Then to take it all the way back to your point, Ryan, yes, and Pink Floyd experimented with this circa the late 60s.
Yeah, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, sure.
Yep. And then they grow out of it. They're like, okay, now we're going to do stuff with composition, maybe some cool sound effects, but like mainly composition and playing. And that's going to be what we're going to, use to show our craziness. But actually, legitimately, I don't know, Emerson, Lake and Palmer maybe use a little bit of hilarious synth, but other than that, these bands later on don't put crazy masking on their voices, don't really go woo-woo-woo with the drums or the guitar or whatever. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the recording. Bass and drums right down the center, that type of stuff. They don't play with the effects as much later. So that's, the bands, the Sinister Six, learn their lessons and become prog.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I know we talked about this for Progmas, but, Strawberry Alarm Clock, I think you and I both dumped on that pretty hard. But that was like, it was almost as if, you got ChatGPT to write a psychedelia song and down to the music and the lyrics. It's like this weird approximation of it. And it somehow captures the entire genre better than anything, because you immediately know it smells exactly like what you think it will.
Yeah. And actually, I'll throw the next thing out there so that was the sounds, the sonic elements of psychedelia. Obviously, the music itself was, it's just peace and love and more peace and love. And actually we talked about that at Progmas too. Like the first two Yes albums are just hippie stuff. One of the songs is just called Astral Traveler. And it's a great song, but it's literally just, this is an astral traveler. He's traveling on a cosmic journey of peace and love. And it's like, yep, cool, that's another one.
Well, you can make fun of those lyrics, and I think we all remember the old joke, I was going to transcend the astral plane, but then I got high. But to your point, even that early Yes, there's still a way more composition involved in that than, let's say, what would you guys consider the most excessive piece of psychedelia out there, where you're just like, this is too much for me?
Yeah, the only one that really, really, really springs to mind for me is It's All Too Much by the Beatles. It's in the name there, but I think that's the most hardcore. Like, it's the most hardcore of, like, they have backwards cymbals and, like, backwards guitar and stuff weaving in and out, and you don't know where anything is. Like, you couldn't pick out the drum beat in any real sense. And it's 6 minutes long, and there's a bunch of kind of stuff going on there. I'd say in terms of a sonic palette, that's the most psychedelic song I can think of. I think there's a lot of these bands, like The Doors or whatever. They're in the psychedelic world, kind of same with Jimi Hendrix or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're blues.
Mm-hmm. Oh, through and through.
With maybe some cool guitar effects.
I don't know why my mind jumped there, but my go-to answer would be In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, Iron Butterfly. The single the single version of that song is less than 3 minutes, but the full version is 17. That has to be close to a record for the biggest cut of a song to a single version, and that is 17 minutes you won't get back of your life. Yeah. And I love a long prog song, but that is way too long.
A lot of jamming.
Yeah.
No, and I was going to say, I think in that sense, and this is why when I'm thinking of this psychedelic kind of color palette, I just keep going back to, like, basically the Beatles, because actually not many bands really experimented with that type of color palette, because, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is also essentially a giant blues song, or maybe not blues, but like it's a solo and another solo, and, kind of like Steppenwolf or something, where it sounds super 1968, but again, it's just organ, a sweet guitar solo, Grateful Dead is the same way, where you keep thinking like, oh, they're just going to play with all these crazy effects. Nope, they just play for 20 minutes, same old guitar solo, like, which is fine. I love it. I think it's just the Beatles where they're really playing with like, where's the sound coming from, man? So anyways, that was my answer. Here we go. So we've got yet another email here. Ian, this is your mother. Everyone dismissed Good Morning from Sgt. Pepper's as a throwaway song. I think it's a song about sameness, and it was accomplished via its delivery. This song needs to be taken together with Paul's part in Day in the Life, as they are both vignettes about the banality of life. I agree with you that this was a Paul and George Martin project, and the lads came along for a ride. Ringo does have a standout moment singing as Billy Shears and drumming on Day in the Life. George really seems to have only written Within Without You, but the song added a trippy vibe to the album. My mind was also blown about When I'm 64. I thought this was a song about someone's wife getting old with someone and not them singing to a parent. Kaboom, mind exploded. Honestly, I think most people interpret that as what one does when they get older. Tell Ed I loved his episode, even though I don't play guitar. He's a fantastic guitarist and so knowledgeable about the evolution of guitar effects. Lots of love, your mother. There you go. So, I'll pick out two things from that anonymous...
who could it be?
From that anonymous email. So we'll do the defense of Good Morning first, because I actually really love that, and this is a greater point about the Beatles. They are so good about hitting the banality of life. So we did dunk on Good Morning as like, yeah, this is probably everyone. It was everyone's skip it for Sgt. Pepper's. And I think because it feels, I don't even know what the word is, but like Plastic Man, where it's just like, okay, good morning, and it feels really boring and stupid, and that's the point. It's just repetition. But that's something I love about the Beatles. I love that they dip into that kind of just daily life, and that for all of their psychedelic nonsense, actually most of their songs are vignettes about just people. And there's a time and place for Yes taking it to the stratosphere, or Roger Waters talking about the world falling apart. But I do, like, I think that because the Beatles are singing about normalness, it does make them extremely accessible.
No, I think that's exactly why there have been so many people that love them throughout the years, and they're one of the most successful of all time. Anybody can relate to it. Anybody. Yep.
It's just good story songs, really. And that actually leads on to When I'm 64. So I don't remember what we said about who When I'm 64 is being sung to. Is he singing to his older self and his partner? Or I think we were making the point more broadly about Sgt. Pepper's being a, not apology letter to Paul's parents, but like a, I see what the appeal of the life you've been leading is, and Paul saying, let's bridge this generational gap. Like, I know I'm a groovy 1960s type of guy, but also I love the Edwardian era or something. I don't know. And again, like tapping into the, I really appreciate the banality and stuff. And this is what Magical Mystery Tour is about, is it is the most banal thing on earth. It's a bus tour of northwestern England that was done primarily by pensioners, like just retired people going to a stupid little seaside day out. That's the banality, and then he obviously made it psychedelic. But again, just touching in that, like, I don't laugh at you, older generation. I actually appreciate what you guys were doing. So in answer to that question, I have no idea who When I'm 64 is being sung to, but maybe the answer is both of them, his older self and his parents.
Well, this anonymous writer makes a very good point, just because people have argued about that forever, though, in terms of who he's writing that song about.
Yeah.
I don't think he's on record anywhere clarifying that. I'm pretty sure he's left it ambiguous on purpose.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think it can be both, is because now he is his older generation.
And quite a bit older than 64.
Yeah, well done, Paul. So, are you ready for the final question here? Who the fuck does Ryan think he is? What type of bullshit is this? You come up on a podcast talking nonsense about Pink Floyd's masterpiece, Metal, being about vacations? Are you deaf? I have a doctorate in prog, and you are wrong, sir. How dare you fill the heads of innocents with your lies? Long-time listener, first-time caller, great pod.
Ian, did you email yourself?
No. Okay, no. Here we go. So this is the actual email.
Ian, you just, that's the thing that you just wanted to say during the episode?
I was just boiling. No, here's the actual email. Hello, hello, I just finished your metal episode, and I loved Ryan's secret vacation concept theory. Can he detect any other hidden concepts on the other albums? For instance, I think In the Court is about nuclear war, In the Court of the Crimson King, and Selling England, brackets, by the pound, is about modern to them, 1970s, Britain. Love the show and keep up the thoughtful conversation. We'll see, who I will have to interpret as Bill Clinton for the purposes of this podcast. Will See is his name. Anyways, love the show and keep up the thoughtful conversation. Will. Thank you, Will. So I will throw that question out to you more broadly. Do you guys detect any other hidden concepts on the albums? I've got two right here that are massive, but I guess should we first address his two ones there? So In the Court about nuclear disaster. And I hate to be so contrarian. I think 21st Century Schizoid Man and Epitaph, obviously. I think 21st Century Schizoid Man is just a wonderful, nervous song. And Epitaph is obviously about the destruction of modern warfare. But then the other three are jazz, and fantasy noodling.
Oh, I think it's only Epitaph, too.
So if we're talking about maybe not a nuclear disaster, but the nuclear age, I think living in the 21st century, well, the 20th century to them, but, that feeling of the future is going to be even more paranoid and scary and schizoid with a lot more jazz runs and a lot of processed vocals. I think that song actually accomplishes everything it set out to do. I don't have a specific thought on I Talk to the Wind or Moonchild. Doesn't really jibe with Mutually Assured Destruction to me. Maybe if you backmask the last 9 minutes of Moonchild, maybe there's something in there. And then I guess I didn't even dare go down this path, but I would be willing to bet there has been some treatise somewhere about In the Court of the Crimson King being about Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon and Khrushchev or something. I don't know.
That would be unreadable.
We're not looking under this pebble here.
No.
That stays in the vault. But yeah, so I'd say two great songs about nuclear, maybe not nuclear disaster, but whatever, the nuclear age, great. And then Selling England by the Pound. So I feel like I've read somewhere as well that it's about 1970s British dysfunction. But The Winter of Discontent, I think, happens after this album is released. So for those at home who love 1970s British politics, basically everyone was on strike in 1973/4 Britain. And then they had, basically everyone was kind of just miserable in a political sense. And then they had a 3-day work week, and they had, they're living by candlelight and whatever else. Basically they had rationing again, energy rationing, whatever. That was all in 1974. In 1970s Britain, obviously there's the Troubles of Northern Ireland, which was a sectarian civil war in Northern Ireland, which is serious stuff, and the subject of the Cranberries' Zombie. But other than that, the other two things going on in 1970s Britain, so Ted Heath, the Prime Minister at the time, redraws the British electoral boundaries in 1972. So maybe that's what this album's about. He decimalizes the pound. So it used to be the classic 12 shillings to a groat, 12 groats to a doubloon, and that sort of thing.
One of my favorite random history facts is the flashcards they had to make for old people when that happened.
Oh, yeah.
Because to them, the decimalized one was actually more confusing.
Maybe that's what this album is talking about, is the decimalization of the pound.
Peter Gabriel just, burning a pile of those cards.
And then obviously, Britain is, I think Britain joins the EU, again, under the Ted Heath premiership, a vigorous government. Actually, goddamn, if he did all three of those things, maybe he does actually have a vigorous government. I don't know. We'll talk about the Ted Heatho-verse later. Brian's chomping at the bit to get into this.
I just worry we've lost every listener by talking about mid-20th century British politics. I would agree, though, regardless of the winter of discontent, I think there was in Britain at the time a recognition that modern life was changing. This is not Prague and a few years earlier, but the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society, I think, touched on a lot of those same themes about the disappearance of the Britain we once knew or the England we once knew. So I think those are definitely themes I can recognize.
Yeah, I mean, I think to get serious about these ridiculous songs for a second, you are 100% correct, where I think Selling England by the Pound very specifically, was the Labour slogan in 1971, no, 70, I think was, whatever. We're not going to get back into those politics. And then they were talking about the loss of Englishness, presumably getting dissolved into like an American-centric globalized world. I guess, this album, if I recall our discussion of it correctly, we also talk about how the album itself doesn't sound very American. It actually sounds pretty English. It doesn't have much like blues in it. It's mostly madrigals and that type of thing. Yeah, so I guess that is an interesting point. It more generally being about the loss of the British spirit and their thoughts about that. So,
you mean to tell me that talking about 1970s British gerrymandering and campaign slogans is going to lose the audience?
I gotta say, Brian, you shock me. I thought you had an ear for what the people wanted. So anyways, that's kind of that. The other one that I'm going to say it was Rufus brought up, and I don't think we fleshed it out really, but I kind of love it, was Nursery Crime, again by Genesis, being about having a breakdown on a country estate. And the first song definitely works in this. Musical Box is literally about like a creepy Victorian, basically nursery room. Everything's going crazy. Giant hogweeds literally coming to life. I kind of like that. Harold the Barrel feels kind of like a super dark nursery rhyme almost. Harlequin feels kind of gardeny to me, but whatever. And then Fountain of Salamassus, I can imagine it being a fountain on the estate, but I didn't really think about anything else that could be, again, tapped into this. But the two really big ones that we definitely talked about at the time, but I do think bear repeating, are, well, the first is Close to the Edge. So the song Close to the Edge is almost like a perfect song about like almost a hero's quest or an enlightenment quest or something like that. Obviously, we start the song itself with the jazz madness, the chaos, the frantic swirling of, I don't know, modern life, your own mind, whatever it may be. And the rest of the song's in this really nice A, B, A, B, C, A, B structure. So the A, which leads us out of the swirling chaos, is the kind of frantic bits. And the first time it comes around is the seasoned witch, call you from the depths of your disgrace, all that sort of stuff. And again, that's being kind of called to the quest. But even in the song, John Anderson says, not right away, not right away. And the B part, the cross the line around the changes of the summer, is kind of the relief from being called to the quest or whatever. So it's faster than we see, getting over all the time I had to worry, leave the changes far behind, relieve the tension, etc. And then we come back to the stress and, again, almost the rush of enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it. My eyes conceived, eclipsed, younger moon attained love, changed, almost strained, crucified my hate and held, armored movers took approach, etc. Kind of like struggling with whatever John Anderson's struggling with. And then again, we come back to a B section. Sudden call shouldn't take away this night of memory. Again, that relief. Then we go into the cave to meditate in her white lace. You could see the lady sadly looking. Again, it kind of, the song itself slows down. We're chilling. Then we rush out with an amazing organ solo, and then we rush and rush and rush. And I almost take this like the rush of an epiphany. Like, oh my God, there's so much knowledge being thrown at me. The time between the notes, the colors to the scenes, constant vogue of triumphs, dislocate man. And then you're on the hill viewing the silence of the valley, witnessing the cycles of the past. And again, just that like, you know, the song's triumphant. You're looking out over the expanse of enlightenment or whatever. You get up and you get down, and the seasons are passing you by. And then the other two songs, I've never quite figured out where they fit, but kind of the two maybe rough places I'd hammer them in. I think And You and I is a almost shortened version of the same kind of concept of someone struggling with the quest to knowledge or whatever it is. And then maybe Siberian Katru is that if you're too wise and too knowledgeable, you sound like a crazy person. I don't know. Anyway, so that's close to the edge.
Oh.
So the other one, and I don't even think it's really a secret concept, is of course Thick as a Brick. In fact, I think it's pretty much right on the tin. You're getting what you get. But, man, it's just such a satisfying, complete, well-done concept album, mapping basically adolescence and, you know, transition into adulthood and stuff. So the very beginning, really don't mind if you sit this one out, suggest that we're starting almost at the beginning or beginning at the end. That's probably more like it. And it's got the flavor of both Let Me Tell You a Tale. This is a tale being told by an adult who's realized the world is foolish, but then kind of gives you the, well, let me tell you how I got here kind of talk. And then we rewind to the beginning of whoever this narrator's life is. Spin me back down the years to the days of my youth, and we see there a son is born, etc., etc. I mean, it'll take forever if we go through all the lyrics here, but kind of flashes of growing up. The poet and the painter casting shadows on the water, like what do you want to do with your life? You know, kind of scenes flashing by, cattle's quietly grazing, builders of castles, young men of the household going into service, not expected for a year. Like there's just stuff flying by. Again, scenes of growing up. And then, of course, we get to maybe literally father-son struggle or maybe generational struggle. What do you do when the old man's gone? Do you want to be him? Etc. And then we come to actual adulthood where we meet our childhood heroes. Won't you join your local government? We'll have Superman for president. Yeah, won't you save us from the hard world? And you realize your childhood heroes maybe aren't your childhood heroes. And then we come to literally both the mid-section of this album and maybe the midlife crisis of this narrator, because we're starting again in the middle of this album. See there, a man is born, pronounce him fit for peace. So we're trying to restart the song again, but they can't quite do it. And then we're kind of looking back on a life well lived or something like that. The legends, the believe in a day, the fading hero, the nighttime, the wise man endorses the poet. Let me tell you the tale of a life. Let me sing you of the losers who lie. Again, these flashes of now reminiscing about life. And then at the very end, we loop back around to you ride yourselves over the fields, you make all your animal deals, and your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick. And I think that's a really satisfying arc of like adolescence to adulthood. I don't think it's a secret concept.
No, I think you're allowed to take that whole thing at face value. I think you're supposed to.
Yeah. And then the final one that I will always love deep in my heart is Brian Salad Surgery, the rock opera about Captain Greg Lake fighting an evil computer in the future.
But that is what the song is about.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's no secret. It's pretty blunt.
The computer literally speaks during the song.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. No, I think it was that I would have loved to have heard the whole album be fit into that. And I guess this brings us to the point about, like, I think albums are just better as concepts because it elevates even stupid songs. And I was like, no one would ever listen to On the Run if it wasn't on Dark Side of the Moon. And I think there's a lot of elements there of, like, I think it brings a certain je ne sais quoi to something.
So do you mean, are you trying to fit in the first half of Brain Salad Surgery into the second? Like, are you trying to connect
Don't put this on me, Brian.
Benny the Bouncer to the computer battle?
Yeah, I know, absolutely.
Are you writing a screenplay?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. I'm doing a first pass treatment. No, but absolutely. And as in, like, legitimately is, even though honestly there's no place in my heart or my screenplay for Benny the Bouncer. Genuinely, if you were like, we start at Jerusalem where Chris Squire. Chris Squire plays Greg Lake in Brian Salad Surgery. No, we start at the very top where Greg Lake is rallying the troops with a rousing hymn, Jerusalem. And then you could replace Toccata, or I guess maybe add lyrics to Toccata to get some like actual exposition as to what's going on in this crazy rock opera. And then you have Greg Lake have a illicit Romeo and Juliet style, West Side Story style love affair with a sub-program of the great computer in Still You Turned Me On. And then at the midway point, we run into Benny the Bouncer. If you got to the midway through and Benny the Bouncer was a fun little, like, hilarious character that he met in the future, I feel like I'd be like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a bouncer at a space club. And actually, he's about to let you into the carnival. That's the whole point. But right now, I'm annoyed because I was like, okay, I was grooving. Oh, Benny the Bouncer. Like, he literally stops the proceedings.
Every script needs a Jar Jar.
Well, and I think that's the point, though, is you could go down as a cult favorite where all the ELP heads out there would be like, oh, Benny the Bouncer. I wish they had done a third song about him or something, where it's like, I want to know about the Bennyverse. Because it's part of a richer tale.
Are there any prog rock movies like
Heavy Metal?
or like Pinball Wizard? You know, like there were Sergeant Pepper's, like weird, you know, like the weird kind of unwatchable like album movies.
No, and I think that's the whole point of this, is that, like, we have not come up with the right story to sell an animation studio yet. I don't think people would have run to have seen only 30 minutes of Carnival 9.
It's kind of shocking ELP didn't try to make a movie.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. ELP making a movie. So genuinely, we're definitely going to cut this because this is wild speculation. But I was like, I think if they had been famous into the 80s, like if they had actually kept going, I think they'd have had a movie in the 80s.
Oh, you have to leave that in. That's not speculation. That's just good.
No, as in, like, I genuinely think they're one of the ones where I could see them being ambitious enough where they eventually would have actually tried to write a rock opera, especially if they had just heard The Wall and been like, oh, those part-timers, we actually know how to write operas. Boom, you're getting a double album with an accompanying motion picture.
I would have given anything for them to try to fly that close to the sun. Oh my God. Right, especially right after The Wall, because that, I was just about to say, my comments ago, The Wall was the lesson everyone just learned to, like, oh, no. We don't do this. They learned everyone's lesson for them.
I mean, the 70s would have been perfect for that. I mean, Kiss had Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park. And, like, I could see, you know, ELP meets the Harlem Globetrotters kind of crossover. Can you imagine the Harlem Globetrotters theme? You know, just like the prog version.
Yeah.
They're spinning the ball like, oh my God, Keith, I can't keep going.
Like ball catches fire.
Yeah. 19 minute solo.
Oh man.
I was going to say that was an awfully flattering, overly kind email towards me, thinking that I had found a hidden meaning, because I definitely don't think I did. But I have nothing like that anywhere for any other album. I don't know where that came from.
No, I'd throw that at you in the sense of, like, obviously we've been having some yucks here, trying to come up with narrative tales as to say how In the Court was the tale of a nuclear disaster, or Selling England by the Pound was the tale of Ted Heath's government or something. I'd actually throw back at you, I think, like, the concept thing is just like, were you in a unified musical and lyrical space? And, like, obviously Moody Blues' Days of the Future Past is both pretty narrative, but also, like, pretty unified as a whatever. And then we're not even going to talk about Pink Floyd because every goddamn one of their albums is just an obvious concept. But I actually don't know how many other bands have seemingly disparate songs that are actually more unified than you think they are at face value. I guess that's the formula I'd use here. Because we talked about like Close to the Edge, and I'd say the song has an amazing story arc for me, but then the other two songs are just like, oh, cool, great nonsense. And they're great nonsense, and they musically sound kind of the same or whatever, but this is in contrast to, say, Wish You Were Here, where it's like all of those songs sound longing and empty and about absence. And all of Animals just sounds like political dysfunction. That's what it is. I actually think it's really rare that bands have such a unified musical universe. So there you go. But maybe lightning strikes once, and you only get to learn about metal being about vacations once in your life. Anyways, that was actually the last email that we'll do here. Thank you all so much for writing in. Do write us any of your thoughts or queries or questions, whatever. helloprogfrog@gmail.com, and we'll do another mailbag at some point. Lads, do you have anything else you want to say about any of this stuff? Best lyrics in prog, psychedelic sonic color palettes, brain salad surgery?
No, I think I hope this episode is a call to arms for our dear listeners, because I think any strange theory you have about what you think these albums and lyrics means, you should submit to us.
Absolutely. We want your most wild, support it with evidence, but we want your most wild theorems. And because I've got two pulsing brains right now, pulsing away, thinking deep proggy thoughts, and they will answer your queries.
Loosely supported by the evidence. You don't have to be too disciplined.
Don't support it too much.
Yeah.
But yes, I second Brian's call to arms.
I'll third it. Nothing could be more interesting or more fun.
Absolutely. We want to hear your wild, wild theories. Fabulous. Okay, so with that, this is the Postmaster General Ian Prize signing off. I feel like this is blasphemous. This is Sergeant Brian.
Thank you, Ian.
And this is Private, now just Private, Ryan Robison.
Well, that's better than dishonorably discharged, so I'll take it.
We will see you when we see you. Thank you so much. This has been a sort of young person's guide to prog rock. So promptly after we finished recording, Brian and I turned off our microphones, but another one of us kept his mic a-rolling. So I'll leave you with Ryan Robison, a one-man play.
There's a cut or two off Love Beach, though. It still slaps pretty hard. That episode's going to be long. Because if anybody could stomach it, it would be you. They all have, their masks are supposed to be like different characters and whatnot, but they like invented mythologies that didn't exist before that. The balls of steel. I already did. It's too late. It's not good. Can't be fixed. Well, you know what? I answered my own question from earlier. With how many Z's? But with more face paint? Oh, that's gonna be expensive. I gotta gel my chest hair. Oh man, there's not enough bronzer in the world. Oh, I guarantee you there is. You probably have multiple options. On that note,